All right, I've got to talk about Percy Jackson. What's up, guys? We have not uploaded to this channel. Well, we actually only uploaded once ever. I say we, it's just me. When I did the Ed Sheeran play tier list, don't recommend watching that. I don't. My initial take on the playlist was way off. Probably have to redo that tier ranking at some point. But now we're back again because I just watched or finished watching the season finale of Percy Jackson and the Olympians season 2, and yeah, I've got to talk about it. First, probably those should provide a little bit of context, and I gotta say, this video is probably not gonna be very well organized or structured. I just wanted to talk about this show. And yeah, it's not gonna, if you watch my other channel, which by the way, One of One Sports, any of you guys sports fans should check it out. Great content over there. Go ahead and find that. Not going to be at all organized like that. Probably might ramble a little bit. But for a little bit of context, because I think this is one of those shows where it's really important. If I tell you I've read all the books and I'm a diehard book fan, which, yeah, that's what it is. That's a lot different than if I tell you, oh, I just happened to be on Disney Plus, started watching Percy Jackson and enjoyed the show, right? Those are two very different vantage points of which you can view the show. I, of course, first read Percy Jackson when I was a lot younger, when I was in, I believe it was fourth grade, read all the Percy Jackson, Heroes of Olympus, Kane Chronicles. That was the when Magnus Chase and Trials of Apollo series were just starting. So I had started reading those. I was obsessed with it. Got into my school's 3 million words club. Like I was just addicted to reading that year because of Percy Jackson. It became my favorite book series of all time. My favorite books of all time, or favorite book of all time, is probably The Last Olympian, or it's definitely The Last Olympian, I would have to say. And Percy Jackson is probably my favorite fictional character of all time, which is saying a lot because I like a lot of fictional characters, but he would have to be at the top. So needless to say, I've hold the show to very high expectations. It was working with source material that's very near and dear to my heart. And it takes a lot for me to, or I expect a lot out of something that's going to put the Percy Jackson name on it. So that is kind of where I'm coming from. And yes, I sometimes do the thing I know a lot of people don't like, but when you make a show based off a book, you're going to get compared to the book. So if you do something different from the book, I'm going to think, first, that's not how the book did it. And did it make it better? Because these are some, or at least to me, some of the best books I've ever read in terms of how much I enjoy them. So if you're making changes to something I like that much, it's got to be good. And that's probably a good segue into how I want to start talking about the season as a whole and a little bit of the good and bad of both. And I think a good way to start with that is by talking about the changes. All right, I'm back with no glasses. It looked like there was a glare being created, so I went and put contacts on real quick. Also got to remember, look at the camera. Yes, where was I? Oh yeah, talking about the changes. And I'm hopefully gonna add a Venn diagram in here during editing. But I feel like there are a few types of changes. So you have the good changes, the bad changes, then you have the changes that don't really do anything, and you have the necessary changes. And there's going to be overlap. Hopefully, this diagram that hasn't been made yet, but hopefully is in the future, kind of showcases that. So a good change is something that improves upon the original story from the book. And what I think the best example of this was in the show was what they did with Polyphemus. Because I think one of the issues with Sea of Monsters, and for me personally, I think Sea of Monsters is the weakest of the Percy Jackson series. And I think a big part of that is it feels a little bit like there's a lack of a threat because you're kind of rehashing the plot of the Lightning Thief, of where you're going to go on this quest and you kind of have to get this magic item, but you also kind of have to save someone. Lightning Thief, it's Sally, and the Lightning or Master Bolt. In the Sea of Monsters, it's going to be Grover and the Golden Fleece. So you're kind of following the same storyline, but it doesn't feel as if there's as much stakes. A part of that is because Polyphemus in the book is just kind of an idiot and doesn't understand anything. Making him smarter, laying a trap, having him be a more menacing villain, I thought was a good change and actually made it more exciting to watch than it would have been to see, if he's just some dolt who can't figure anything out, right? So I thought that was actually a good change that the show made. And there's also just the necessary changes that, maybe it doesn't necessarily make the show worse or better, but because of the constraints of a TV show versus, a book, that's what kind of has to happen. So one of these, I think, was like Percy. Oh, I should mention, I reread all the Percy Jackson Heroes of Olympus books over my winter break. So they're pretty fresh in my mind. I think in the island, Percy looks in the mirror and sees Luke in the reflection in the book, but it wouldn't make sense because we haven't really explored Percy comparing himself to Luke. So it's just a necessary change. It doesn't necessarily make it better or worse. It just fits better with the show. There's also a change due to budget constraints or limitations within the series. So in the book, the separate obstacles are Cersei's Island and the Sirens. But in the show, turn it into one episode where they're connected, right? You get off Cersei's island or Cersei Spa and Resort through going by the Sirens. So it just combined it, and it's probably because of a little bit of budget constraint or episode constraint, right? You don't have time to do each obstacle, so make it one is just more practical for the show. Doesn't necessarily make it worse, doesn't necessarily improve the story. It's just different because of the show format. So that's another type of change. And then there's the bad changes. And those are the ones where it's like, well, why are you doing this? Because you have, this really good source material to work from. And when you make changes that don't improve the story, it just leaves me kind of questioning why, what made you do that? What was the thought process here that made you think it was better? Because I think it wasn't necessarily. So I'm going to go through a couple of my biggest gripes. The first and biggest one for me is, why did they do kind of just spoil the Talia twist? And I know for a lot of people, it wasn't going to be this big reveal. Oh, shocker, Talia's alive. Like, everyone's read the books. We knew that. We knew Talia was coming. But to make the characters not surprised at all, deviated so much from the book. And I feel like for an ending that was pretty good, and we'll talk more about the season finale in just a second, it would have been better if it wasn't like, oh, everyone knew Talia was going to come back when they put the fleece on the tree, whereas in the book it's this huge surprise. They put it on, Percy runs down there and everyone's in shock, and he's the one like, what's going on? He doesn't, like, no one knows, or everyone's in shock. Percy doesn't even know what's going on. I feel like that was better when I read the book than just being like, everyone like, oh, you had a dream, oh yeah, Talia's coming back. Annabeth tells Luke, oh yeah, Talia's coming. Everyone just knows Talia is coming back in the finale. I didn't like that they did that. I didn't think it added to the story. I thought it would have been better. Even if you wanted to hint at it a little bit, it was just so overt, and just everyone being told and saying it out loud, like, if we put the fleece, Talia is going to come back. I didn't like that change. Second change that I wasn't the most fond of that jumped out was at the Spa and Resort. Now, like I said, I don't mind that they combined the Sirens and the Spa. I feel like they had to do it, whatever. It works fine enough. And they changed the storyline of, instead of Cersei, just turning men into guinea pigs, instead it has to do with the fatal flaw and wanting to keep heroes there because of how they treated her. Also a fine change, probably made her a little bit more interesting as a character. Nothing wrong with that, but I did have a problem with the way they exited, and also with how they handled Annabeth in the episode, where she's just like, yeah, my fatal flaw is pride, and I'm proud of that. And then the whole thing with like the Sirens coming and her almost getting killed, I feel like that whole sequence, this is gonna be one of those rounds, was botched because, one, they wait to put on the wax until they're right there, which was just a weird way to film the scene. Like, obviously you would think they would put it in sooner if there's like things that kill everyone who's coming by. They wait till the last minute and then realize there's only enough for one, and then Cersei takes it. So everything goes wrong all at once. And then Annabeth thinks she can trick them, whatever, I get it. It's pride. She's, that thing's happening. But to have Percy save her because she was somehow blocking the Sirens, like, if no one's ever tried going with two people or going in a pair before, it was a weird thing, because obviously the Sirens, he would still hear them, and I kind of get what they're going for. I just didn't think it worked. Didn't like how they escaped that. But that wasn't even what I wanted to talk about. My problem was with when he turns Blackbeard back into a pirate. All the other pirates, they're supposed to destroy Cersei's spot or Cece's spot and resort, I should say. They don't. They just leave. And that post-credit, the post-credit of the finale, that really hurt, because as someone who desperately, I know we're probably not going to get it, but desperately wants the Heroes of Olympus series to happen. It's movies or TV shows, some form. I want Heroes of Olympus almost more than I want anything else to be adapted to, visual media. That post-credit hurt, because it would have been a lot cooler if they showed the Spawn Resort and it was destroyed and Hilla's escaping and like Rhaena's escaping. That would have been crazy. But because that place is supposed to get destroyed, which is supposed to lead to Hilla becoming Queen of the Amazons, knowing who Percy Jackson is, and Rhaena heading to Camp Jupiter and knowing who Percy Jackson is, and because of this encounter, and that plays into Son of Neptune, it plays to the whole series as far as Hilla's concerned. And now none of that can happen, because that whole storyline of Hilla and Rhaena is based upon the spa being destroyed and where they go from there. Instead, we see the spa being perfectly fine, them putting in statues, Hilla still working there. So it's just completely different and disappointing. If they had showed a post-credit where it was destroyed and Hilla was like escaping, that would have been really cool. Instead, I just got less hopeful, and I already don't have much hope, but less hopeful that Heroes of Olympus in some capacity would ever happen. So that was a change I didn't like and was disappointed in. So like I said, not all the changes are bad. There are some I really dislike, and that's going to happen when I like these books so much. I'm not the most receptive to change, and if they did, like, I'm even more receptive to it this season because, like I said, Sea of Monsters, for my money, the weakest of the Percy Jackson series. If we were making like Last Olympian or even Titan's Curse next season, or even Battle of the Labyrinth, and they made some major changes, like I would be more disgruntled than I am now. But because I recognize, or at least I find there to be some major issues with Sea of Monsters, not even major, it's still a book I really like. It's just not on par with the other Percy Jackson books. I'm more open to changes, and even then, it's still like, oh, why'd you do that? But like I said, they're not all bad. But we got to talk about the finale because the finale wasn't just changes from the book. It just wasn't in the book. Nothing about the series finale, aside from Talia coming back to life, which again was, handled completely differently than it was in the book, doesn't happen the same way at all. The whole final episode is just original creations from Disney in this series. Nothing about that is based on any source material, and it had me pretty conflicted about how I felt about it. Because there was a lot of the finale that I actually really enjoyed, and it was maybe like it has an argument it was the best episode from the season, because there was a lot it did really well. The final, like the battle, was actually really well choreographed. If you ask me, it was intense. Percy fighting Luke was really good. Tyson stepping in, all the action was handled really, really well, better than I thought they were going to handle it. So the fight scenes I enjoyed a bunch, and there was a lot of emotion in this episode where Percy talking to his mom, Percy being scared of Talia coming back, the discussion over Talia, what she'll do, Chiron revealing the truth about Zeus, which again, we're going to talk about we're talking about more of the details in a second, but there was just more. And Tyson and Percy's like brother scene before he leaves, there was a lot more emotional weight to this episode than probably any other episode of the season, which helped it a lot when you add to it how good the action was. And also the story was pretty good. And it is a different experience for me because even watching on an episode to episode basis, sure, there are changes made in the book, but for the most part, you kind of know what's going to happen if you've read it. Like there's not deviating too much. But this was completely different. So it did have me sore on the edge of my seat. I don't know where this is going because none of this is in the source material. So from that standpoint, I was more invested, more curious, which also helped to my enjoyment a little bit. Another reason why I understand why some people like changes, keep it fresh. I still like, I'd be fine if they took like word for word from the book and just like turned it into, or had the actors play it out, like scene by scene, didn't change a thing. Like I'd kind of be okay with that from like my standpoint, but I do understand how some people like them to mix it up a little bit, keep it fresh, and having a whole season finale not from the book is definitely one way to do that and kept it very interesting and engaging. Sorry for another hard cut. Had to plug in my computer while recording. Another thing that because I really enjoyed about the finale was what they did with Chris Rodriguez's character, as we get to see his turn a little bit more. And we get to see it happen, which because he's going to be such a big player down the road, and not such a big player, but a big player down the road. It was good to see him get some more screen time, see his turn on Clarice, which obviously in season 4 is going to be a major relationship in terms of how that's going to take place. So I like getting to engage with his character a little bit more. I would have liked to see like maybe a Beckendorf show up or a Selena. Like I would have liked to see a little more characters, but you can't complain too much. But one of the things I'm not even sure if it's a complaint. It was just such a drastic change. And that was when Chiron retells the Talia story, like to have Zeus, instead of it being a thing where he spared her life, to just have him zap her because he didn't want to be a child of prophecy and she was, probably a threat in terms of denying Zeus. Like I understand it. It makes sense in terms of the plot. I get all that, but that's such a drastic change to the story. And, I don't know how the characters would respond to that because that's not what happened in the book. So when they learn this, and obviously the season's about over, it's the Percy Talia thing. They're staring at each other. His nightmare just woke up. I don't know how Percy would have reacted to this. I have to think on it more because in the book, the gods obviously weren't always the friendliest. Dionysus was, as camp director, didn't even learn the students' names, and the gods had all their flaws throughout. It's, very, very, very apparent throughout the entire series that they aren't always, the nicest of gods to the demigods and don't necessarily look after their kids. And, that's a whole thing going into even season 5 when Percy finally gets his, wish, right? And then even into after that, what Hera does and all that goes crazy because of the mistakes the gods make along the way. But when Percy was at this age, he was definitely more impressionable. And for him to learn, that Zeus would do that, that's a pretty big deal. And I don't quite know how I feel about it yet, just because it was so drastic. I was so caught off guard when he retold that story I just assumed they were gonna go with the normal, like, yeah, Talia fought, she was losing, Zeus did it to spare her life. Changing that is really, really big. And then this is where I want to talk about what they did with Talia versus Percy, because I actually do think it was really cool. Because their rivalry wasn't really explored in the books really a lot, but you could clearly see them setting that up. And I do wonder how much of it is going to come into play in season 3, when they find, I'm assuming they're going to go on the quest to save Annabeth. No, I don't know if that's spoiler. I don't know if I should say spoilers when I talk about things happening in the future seasons or not, because it's based off the books. I'm not sure. But yeah, so I wonder how much of that rivalry will continue to come into play. But they clearly were doing the mirror image. Percy makes the coin analogy. We see them faint at the same time. Or not Kronos. Chiron thinks that Kronos has his champion in Talia, and we see all these parallels between them, and even into their parents. As we get, Talia screaming out never and learning what that was all about and how Zeus was so harsh. On the other side, we get Poseidon in Percy's dream being much more caring, right? We see their different parental upbringings, and not even upbringings, but interaction with their godly parents. And Percy is very, very nervous about Talia. And if she is the one of the prophecy, he does not trust her. Meanwhile, she has the relationship with Annabeth. He has the relationship with Annabeth. And just seeing how they are very similar, because from Annabeth's point of view, this is another. Annabeth sees them as really similar, especially when Percy gives the speech where he kind of has his becoming a hero moment. Up until this point, because this doesn't happen in the book. So really, through 2 books, Percy isn't necessarily a real hero. Yes, he goes on the first quest in the Lightning Thief, but it's to save his mom. And then in the second one, he sneaks off and goes, but it's mostly to save, or not mostly, it's to save Grover, right? He's always trying to save someone he cares about. But this time, when he does the whole speech of like, we fight for our own and he's protecting camp, this is a truly heroic moment that's selfless. It's to defend camp, but it's not someone personally like related to him. Whereas in the first 3 books, that's what you get, right? It's save Sally, and it's save Grover, then it's save Annabeth. It's not really related to the other bigger scope. So to get a heroic moment from him this early was really cool. And then Annabeth watching the background when he gives like the, we fight for our own, the way Talia says it. And she sees all the parallels. She sees all the similarities, while it's also highlighting such stark contrast and developing what feels like it's going to be a big storyline of their rivalry in season 3. Is Talia, going to be the one of the prophecy? Obviously, we know the answer, but it just is a really cool storyline to flesh out more that they didn't do in the books as much as I thought they could have. And I think that could be really fun, and was something I liked a lot from the season finale. Now, because I've been so positive, have to talk more about what I didn't like of the season finale. Because I didn't like how the whole Chiron just showing back up, and they didn't do the party ponies thing in the last episode. Instead, they had Sally come and kind of pick him up with the car. So we never got to see the whole Chiron clearing his name. He's still related to Kronos, so a little bit unclear about how all of that went down. I also didn't like how when Tantalus is gone and the campers still are acting like they have to listen to him if arrest Percy, when they're supposed to like Percy and they're not supposed to like the camp director. So that was weird to have all that going on. So there were a couple things that I didn't think were handled the best. I also mentioned the whole I wish they would have been more subtle in the foreshadowing of Talia, not just outright saying, yeah, she's gonna be brought back to life with the Golden Fleece. And I also thought Luke, I shouldn't say that, because I do like what they're doing with Luke to make him more, understandable, or, you kind of see the good in him. It's almost like you're looking at it more from the way Annabeth sees it versus the way Percy would see him in the book. Because in the book, being told in Percy's point of view, Percy really doesn't like Luke. So it would make sense that you get this slant of him being much more villainous, but it's also making such a point in the show to show a little bit of conflict within him. While he's still clearly a bad guy and he's going to try to kill Percy and bring down the camp and all that, he's not totally lost yet, which is important, obviously, if you know where the story is going. So I do like that, but I don't like his, his second in command. Oh, what's her name? Why am I blanking? Allison, right? That took me a few seconds. I think it's Allison. Hopefully I have that right. But second command is not fleshed out at all. She is just there to disagree with Luke and want him to be harsher and just kind of do different things. She's not even that good at fighting either. But she's coming back for future seasons. I don't remember her in the books. Maybe she is there and I'm just forgetting, but I don't remember her in the books. If she's there, feel free to comment. But I didn't really think her character was all that interesting. And I thought, all in all, the demigods on the other side should have been more interesting because Luke is super fleshed out and we start to get it with Chris. But all we know is that these other demigods have turned evil. And while we can assume why that's happened, we don't really know anything about them. Allison was kind of the one chance for them to do that. Instead, she's just like angry and disagreeable, which isn't the most interesting thing to do to a character. All in all, though, I did really like the episode and I did really like the season finale. Now, I think there's definitely issues. I don't think it's a perfect show by any mean, but it did improve a lot from season one, which is important because I think The Lightning Thief is better than The Sea of Monsters when it comes to the book. But because of the improved budget and I think improved writing and improved acting all around, the show got better from season one to season two. Hopefully that trajectory continues and it gets better going into season 3. I think it should, because season 3 or book 3 is definitely better than books 1 and book 2. It's darker, it's more mature. It's a really, really good. The Titan's Curse is a really, really good book, and I'm looking forward to it already coming out a year, not even a year away, coming out in December, which was just great news to see. So yes, of course, I'm obviously excited for season 3, and I do enjoy the show. I just like the book so much that I'm going to be critical when things happen. I'm holding it to such a high standard because I expect the best from anything called Percy Jackson. But all in all, the show was really good. The season was really good. Had a lot to talk about. It was unorganized. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you guys have any questions or want to discuss anything, make sure to comment down below. Look forward to talking about all this and let me know your general thoughts. What did you think about Percy Jackson and the Olympians season 2? Also consider leaving a like and subscribe. This is obviously a channel I haven't done much with, but I'm going to want to be talking about more stuff. There's a ton of shows and movies coming out this year or have already come out I want to talk about, or old stuff I'm rewatching. I've been looking the new Phineas and Ferb season. I watched that, made me make a video. Watched Smallville recently. There's a ton of good movies. We're getting an Avengers movie, a Michael Jackson movie, a Dune movie. Like, there's a ton of stuff this year. So this channel is definitely going to be having more videos in the future. Until then, I thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.